Can you imagine Toy Story in this motherfucker?
Hello, welcome to my studio and welcome to another edition of Art Success with me, Adelaide Damoah. So I'm an artist, a painter to be precise, and I really enjoy probing the minds of other artists to find out what makes them tick, to find out how they overcome the challenges that they inevitably have to face and how they achieve the successes that they achieve in their careers. Hence this series entitled Art Success. And so today's interview I'm really excited to announce is with the artist Zak Ové. Now, I was first confronted by Zak's really exciting work, The Invisible Men, which is a series of 40 sculptures which were guarding the gates of Somerset House at the 154 Art Fair in 2016. And from that point I knew I just had to get an interview with him, so here we are. Zak graduated with a degree in film in fine art in 1987 and then went on to have a really successful career as a film director. So he only came to the world of fine art around 10 years ago, and he entered at quite a high level, with his first outing, as it were, being with the Fine Art Society in London. Zak works across film, photography and sculpture. So I'm very excited to introduce to you Zak Ové. Enjoy. You started 10 years ago as an artist.
Oh, where are we now? 2000, yeah, about 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
I was back in Trinidad, actually since about 2000. What had happened was I'd been making regular trips back to Trinidad to document Trinidad's carnival.
Yes.
I'd become particularly interested in the storylines that were being played out in Trinidad's old masque, and it was a kind of epiphany moment for me in discovering this art form that had been there in my backyard, so to speak, right? But that had so many incredible elements to it that kind of, I don't know, encapsulated me. What was interesting to me was how carnival and masquerade was used in that situation, really to show colonial masters that, look, we can't be duped. You'll never condition us to being slaves within the mindset and fabric, and that through costume and theatrics we can be anything in that sense. And that was kind of what led me towards that. But documenting the carnival and filming and rigorously taking pictures, what became infectious to me was the making of things, and I kind of wanted to do that more, or realise that the pleasure and the enjoyment that the makers of carnival costumes were having. And I wondered, coming from London, living in a situation between this culture and the culture back in Britain, how do I enter into this, and what can I bring to this in a way, right? From my experiences from Britain, from everything I know from London and working here. And what was fascinating to me within that was that here you have old masks and all these things. In a way, one of the things that I kind of latched onto was that the culture of carnival needed a voice in a new millennium, right? It needed to transpire a kind of arc within its journey that led it forward. And to me, partly what was necessary was the revision of new materials and new technology that give it kind of new life and new meaning.
Yeah.
So one of the things I became fascinated by was how one moves an old world culture into the future.
Okay.
Right? So kind of past world, future world in that sense. And what needed to be brought in terms of the elements to that art practice to make that happen.
And is that what led to that piece, the one that ended up at the British Museum?
In a way, I mean, that was interesting because I had been asked to make a piece of work, or two pieces of work, that spoke about the relationship between Africa and the Caribbean. And in the beginning I made it very clear that it's very hard to speak about the whole Caribbean necessarily, because obviously each island has its own history and culture. But stemming through Trinidad's history within the carnival, I wanted to find masquerade characters that were still prevalent and still as important in the Caribbean as they were in Africa. So I chose Mocha Jumbies in particular because they made the transition from Africa to the Caribbean through slavery, and were still ritualized. It's something that within the fabric of our kind of Africanisms had remained, if you like. So it seemed that they were specifically right for the kind of installation necessary for the Great Hall, which is also very high. So I needed to make something tall.
Yeah.
And these stilt walkers, deities, seemed perfect for that situation.
Yeah.
So that was kind of why I chose those.
Yeah. And how did you get that commission? That's a pretty major commission to get.
It took a long time. I had to build the trust and faith of Chris Spring, that ran the Africa Sainsbury's Gallery.
Okay.
And we had been talking about doing something together that spoke about Africa's relationship to the Caribbean for years. I think it's something that he really wanted to make happen.
Yeah.
Because obviously Britain has so many people that come to the museum with Caribbean descendancies, and they're interested in their story, right? From Africa to the Caribbean to Britain.
Yeah.
And that is the missing link that's not represented in the museum, right? And that's why there was a strong feeling from everybody involved that it needed to be addressed.
And now you're currently represented by Vigo Gallery.
Yes.
Yeah. How did that relationship come about?
Well, it's a great relationship. Toby Clark I started working with when he was director of the Fine Art Society, and I had literally walked in there without having had a show. As I mentioned to you before, moving into sculpture and mask making and painting, etc., was something that came to me after a long time, probably in my mid-30s, having been to Trinidad documenting, and then finally building up the courage to want to make my own works.
And then you just walked into Vigo Gallery after all of that, and you just developed this relationship?
No, it wasn't as simple as that.
No.
What happened was, as I explained to you, I've been working alongside other artists here in the UK,
Yeah.
and I've been working side by side with Hassan Hajjaj for a long time, who's a celebrated photographer now in Morocco and internationally. At that point in time, we were both very excited to become artists, and we're trying to find a way in, but also trying to discover, I guess, within ourselves, what our stories had within them that we wanted to project in the work,
Yeah.
right? Which is a big part of it. But the nice thing was in that time, was working alongside somebody else in very different practice, but I think the thing we had in common was that he had spent a long time in Morocco and was now living in London. I had spent a lot of time in Trinidad and was always living in Britain and growing up here. So it was how the kind of international side of your story, or your internationalism in that sense of having a split personality kind of in two places, congeals to really then speak about who you become in the fullest sense of yourself, and how you in the end take those two cultures and mesh them in the work, quite literally. You know. So that was a really interesting process that's kind of led me into this. Hassan introduced me to Toby Clark at the Fine Art Society, because Toby had become interested in his work. And a lot of the time, I think one meets gallerists through other artists at their recommendation, perhaps because the gallerist already likes the artist's work who he's in discussion with, and feels if he or she feels strongly enough about you and your work, then it's worth looking at. So a lot of the time, the way forward I find is through other people that are making work, you know, and recommendations through them and advice through them, you know. So it was interesting. It's been an interesting journey. But I was lucky in that when I met Toby, I persisted in phoning and calling and sending work until I kind of built enough trust within him to come and see the work in the studio. And I mean, it went from there.
The show that you had at the Fine Art Society, that was your very first show.
Yeah.
And you managed to sell everything.
No, the first solo show, I think we didn't sell everything. We did well,
yeah.
But no, it was all good.
That's
yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
How did it feel your first time of selling work in a show?
I mean, I was pleased that people were receiving it and wanted to pay for it. I was probably more nervous with showing the work in public than the actual thing of the sale. You know what I mean? In terms of who was looking at the work and in what setting. I was very nervous showing work in the Fine Arts Society because of the history of all the great artists that have been there before me. So when these guys marched in, it felt a little strange, but brilliant at the same time. And it's been an amazing journey since. You know, we've been able to go to Venice, we've done Somerset House, we're putting work in the British Museum. So really, really nice to find people to work with that felt like family to make that journey with. You know, it's been good.
Yeah. What would you say, since you started 10 years ago, what would you say has been your biggest challenge and how did you overcome it?
My biggest challenge?
Yep.
I think challenges come up all the time, year in, year out. I don't know, I guess what's been nice is that as things grow, so the challenges. I think what you really want is a journey where the struggles get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And that you're able to champion each one in order to move on to the next thing.
In the context of working in the UK as an artist in an art world which is obviously predominantly white, have you come across any specific prejudices as an artist of colour?
I mean, it's something, not really, not to a large degree. I think we're in an interesting time, right, to be honest with you. I think I suffered a lot more prejudice when queuing up to be in the workplace as a young professional, as a younger man in the 80s and the 90s. I think it's been quite interesting entering into a career like this, kind of post my mid-30s, but also at a time when contemporary black art is very well received and sought after, where it's now considered a part of the mainstream. I think, in a way, when you look at black contemporary arts at the moment and you compare it to black music years ago, we're at a stage that might even still be pre-Motown, right? So what I perceive will happen is that in the future, where many kids have rushed towards things like music and media, the arts will suddenly become a much shinier place to exist and speak within, right? And I think that's really, really interesting. For me, one of the things I really enjoyed about trying to develop work within this platform was the kind of freedom of speech that's available within it right now, right? That I didn't or couldn't find in the same way in other mediums, if you like, in commercial film and television, without queuing up to be edited, right? Music, same thing, right? Within the pop industry now, it's a very clean cut world. But I think, one of the things I always wanted was to make silent noise. I wanted these sculptures behind us in a way to kind of scream silently. And, my heroes, people like Chuck D, stuff like that from Public Enemy, was like, how do you turn those moments into sculptures? How do we reference all the things that we're kind of vibing on right now and make those pieces of contemporary modern art? So it's interesting for me right now that the arts offers a creative means of documentation to reference the culture that we're moving in.
Of all of the things that you've achieved so far to date in your art career, which would be the thing that you would say you were the most proud of?
I couldn't say that.
No.
It's like having a favourite child. It's impossible. I always try to put the same amount of effort into everything, and whatever, struggle and pain. But I think work by work, anything that I'm trying to exhibit, I've enjoyed making. Otherwise it's not coming out.
What does success in the art world mean to you?
It means really having the opportunities to try and make the important works that you feel are necessary in your lifetime.
If you could go back in time to when you first started out on this journey as an artist, as a professional artist, so 10 years ago, what advice would you give yourself?
Hustle harder.
You don't think you've hustled hard?
Yeah, no, I do. I'm joking. What advice would I give myself? Listen. Really listen to all the advice you're given.
And what advice would you give to somebody now who's just starting out?
Always, don't be deterred. Believe in yourself. Have conviction. And really enjoy what you do. Yeah, no, it's really important. Have confidence. Self-belief is a must. And then really try and extend yourself. Push yourself into situations that feel uncomfortable. and try and discover who you are in those moments and put that into the work.
Hello and welcome back. Thanks very much for joining me for that edition of Art Success with the wonderful Zak Ové. I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. Please do subscribe to my channel, because by subscribing you get to keep up to date with the latest interviews like this one, and you just never know where I'm going to end up. Until next time, take care. Bye.